Chapter 47. A Clash of Wills. When morning came, Eragon's cheek was raw from chafing against Snowfire's neck, and he was sore from his fight with Murtagh. They had alternated sleeping in their saddles throughout the night. It had allowed them to outdistance the Urgal troops, but neither of them knew if the lead could be retained. The horses were exhausted to the point of stopping, yet they still maintained a relentless pace. Whether it would be enough to escape depended on how rested the monsters were, and if Eragon and Murtagh's horses survived. The Boar Mountains cast great shadows over the land, stealing the sun's warmth. To the north was the Hatterack Desert, a thin white band as bright as noonday snow. "I must eat," said Saphira. "Days have passed since I last hunted. Hunger claws my belly. If I start now, I might be able to catch enough of those bounding deer for a few mouthfuls." Eragon smiled at her exaggeration. "Go if you must, but leave Arya here. I will be swift." He untied the elf from her belly and transferred her to Snowfire's saddle. Saphira soared away, disappearing in the direction of the mountains. Eragon ran beside the horses, close enough to Snowfire to keep Arya from falling. Neither he nor Murtagh intruded on the silence. Yesterday's fight no longer seemed as important because of the Urgals, but the bruises remained. Saphira made her kills within the hour and notified Eragon of her success. Eragon was pleased that she would soon return. Her absence made him nervous. They stopped at a pond to let the horses drink. Eragon idly plucked a stalk of grass, twirling it while he stared at the elf. He was startled from his reverie by the steely rasp of a sword being unsheathed. He instinctively grasped Zarok and spun around in search of the enemy. There was only Murtagh, his long sword held ready. He pointed at a hill ahead of them, where a tall, brown-cloaked man sat on a sorrel horse, mace in hand. Behind him was a group of 20 horsemen. No one moved. "Could they be the Varden?" asked Murtagh. Eragon surreptitiously strung his bow. "According to Arya, they're still scores of leagues away. This might be one of their patrols or raiding groups. Assuming they're not bandits." Murtagh swung onto Tornak and readied his bow. "Should we try to outrun them?" asked Eragon, draping his blanket over Arya. The horseman must have seen her, but he hoped to conceal the fact that she was an elf. "It wouldn't do any good," said Murtagh, shaking his head. "Tornak and Snowfire are fine war horses, but they are tired, and they aren't sprinters. Look at the horses those men have. They're meant for running. They would catch us before we had gone half a mile. Besides, they may have something important to say. You'd better tell Saphira to hurry back." Eragon was already doing that. He explained the situation, then warned, "Don't show yourself unless it's necessary. We're not in the Empire, but I still don't want anyone to know about you." "Never mind that," she replied. "Remember, magic can protect you where speed and luck fail." He felt her take off and raced toward them, skimming close to the ground. The band of men watched them from the hill. Eragon nervously gripped Zarok. The wire-wrapped hilt was secure under his glove. He said in a low voice, "If they threaten us, I can frighten them away with magic. If that doesn't work, there's Saphira. I wonder how they'd react to a rider. So many stories have been told about their powers. It might be enough to avoid a fight." "Don't count on it," said Murtagh flatly. "If there's a fight, we'll just have to kill enough of them to convince them we're not worth the effort." His face was controlled and unemotional. The man on the sorrel horse signalled with his mace, sending the horsemen cantering toward them. The men shook javelins over their heads, whooping loudly as they neared. Battered sheaths hung from their sides. Their weapons were rusty and stained. 4 of them trained arrows on Eragon and Murtagh. Their leaders swirled the mace in the air, and his men responded with yells as they wildly encircled Eragon and Murtagh. Eragon's lips twitched. He almost loosed a blast of magic into their midst, then restrained himself. "We don't know what they want yet," he reminded himself, containing his growing apprehension. The moment Eragon and Murtagh were thoroughly surrounded, the leader reined in his horse, then crossed his arms and examined them critically. He raised his eyebrows. "Well, these are better than the usual dregs we find. At least we got healthy ones this time, and we didn't even have to shoot them. Grieg will be pleased." The men chuckled. At his words, a sinking sensation filled Eragon's gut. A suspicion stirred in his mind. "Saphira." "Now as for you two," said the leader, speaking to Eragon and Murtagh, "if you would be so good as to drop your weapons, you'll be avoid being turned into living quivers by my men." The archers grinned suggestively. The men laughed again. Murtagh's only movement was to shift his sword. "Who are you, and what do you want? We are free men travelling through this land. You have no right to stop us." "Oh, I have every right," said the man contemptuously. "And as for my name, slaves do not address their masters in that manner, unless they want to be beaten." Eragon cursed to himself. Slavers! He remembered vividly the people he had seen at auction in Drasleona. Rage boiled within him. He glared at the men around him with new hatred and disgust. The lines deepened on the leader's face. "Throw down your swords and surrender." The slavers tensed, staring at them with cold eyes, as neither Eragon nor Murtagh lowered his weapon. Eragon's palm tingled. He heard a rustle behind him, and then a loud curse. Startled, he spun around. One of the slavers had pulled the blanket off Arya, revealing her face. He gaped in astonishment, then shouted, "Torkenbrand, this one's an elf!" The men stirred with surprise while the leader spurred his horse over to Snowfire. He looked around at Arya and whistled. "Well, how much is she worth?" someone asked. Torkenbrand was quiet for a moment, then spread his hands and said, "At the very least, fortunes upon fortunes. The Empire will pay a mountain of gold for her." The slavers yelled with excitement and pounded each other on the back. A roar filled Eragon's mind as Saphira banked sharply far overhead. "Attack now!" he cried. "But let them escape if they run." She immediately folded her wings and plummeted downward. Eragon caught Murtagh's attention with a sharp signal. Murtagh took the cue. He smashed his elbow into a slaver's face, knocking the man out of his saddle, and jabbed his heels into Tornak. With a toss of his mane, the warhorse jumped forward, twirled around, and reared. Murtagh brandished his sword as Tornak plunged back down, driving his forehooves into the back of the dismounted slaver. The man screamed. Before the slavers could gather their senses, Eragon scrambled out of the commotion and raised his hands, invoking words in the ancient language. A globule of indigo fire struck the ground in the midst of the fray, bursting into a fountain of molten drops that dissipated like sun-warmed dew. A second later, Saphira dropped from the sky and landed next to him. She parted her jaws, displaying her massive fangs, and bellowed. "Behold!" cried Eragon over the Fura. "I am a rider!" He raised Zarok over his head, the red blade dazzling in the sunlight, then pointed it at the slaves. "Flee if you wish to live!" The men shouted incoherently and scrambled over each other in their haste to escape. In the confusion, Torkenbrand was struck in the temple with a javelin. He tumbled to the ground, stunned. The men ignored their fallen leader and raced away in a ragged mass, casting fearful looks at Saphira. Torkenbrand struggled to his knees. Blood ran from his temple, branching across his cheek with crimson tendrils. Murtagh dismounted and strode over to him, sword in hand. Torkenbrand weakly raised his arm as if to ward off a blow. Murtagh gazed at him coldly, then swung his blade at Torkenbrand's neck. "No!" shouted Eragon, but it was too late. Torkenbrand's decapitated trunk crumpled to the ground in a puff of dirt. His head landed with a hard thump. Eragon rushed to Murtagh, his jaw working furiously. "Is your brain rotten?" he yelled, enraged. "Why did you kill him?" Murtagh wiped his sword on the back of Torkenbrand's jerkin. The steel left a dark stain. "I don't see why you're so upset." "Upset?" exploded Eragon. "I'm well past that. Did it even occur to you that we could just leave him here and continue on our way? No. Instead you turn into an executioner and chop off his head. He was defenseless." Murtagh seemed perplexed by Eragon's wrath. "Well, we couldn't keep him around. He was dangerous. The others ran off. Without a horse he wouldn't have made it far. I didn't want the Urgles to find him and learn about Arya, so I thought it would—" "But to kill him?" interrupted Eragon. Saphira sniffed Torkenbrand's head curiously. She opened her mouth slightly as if to snap it up, then appeared to decide better of it, and prowled to Eragon's side. "I'm only trying to stay alive," stated Murtagh. "No stranger's life is more important than my own." "But you can't indulge in wanton violence. Where is your empathy?" growled Eragon, pointing at the head. "Empathy? Empathy? What empathy can I afford my enemies? Shall I dither about whether to defend myself because it will cause someone pain? If that had been the case, I would have died years ago. You must be willing to protect yourself and what you cherish, no matter what the cost." Eragon slammed Zarok back into its sheath, shaking his head savagely. "You can justify any atrocity with that reasoning." "Do you think I enjoy this?" Murtagh shouted. "My life has been threatened from the day I was born. All of my waking hours have been spent avoiding danger in one form or another, and sleep never comes easily because I always worry if I'll live to see the dawn. If there was ever a time I felt secure, it must have been in my mother's womb, though I wasn't safe even there. You don't understand. If you lived with this fear, you would have learned the same lesson I did. Do not take chances. He gestured at Torkenbrand's body. He was a risk that I removed. I refuse to repent, and I won't plague myself over what is done and past. Eragon shoved his face into Murtag's. It was still the wrong thing to do. He lashed Arya to Saphira, then climbed onto Snowfire. Let's go. Murtagh guided Tornak around Torkenbrand's prone form in the blood-stained dust. They rode at a rate that Eragon would have thought impossible a week ago. Leagues melted away before them as if wings were attached to their feet. They turned south between two outstretched arms of the Ball Mountains. The arms were shaped like pincers about to close, the tips a day's travel apart. Yet the distance seemed less because of the mountain's size. It was as if they were in a valley made for giants. When they stopped for the day, Eragon and Murtagh ate dinner in silence, refusing to look up from their food. Afterward, Eragon said tersely, "I'll take the first watch." Murtagh nodded and lay on his blankets with his back to Eragon. "Do you want to talk?" asked Saphira. "Not right now," murmured Eragon. "Give me some time to think. I'm confused." She withdrew from his mind with a gentle touch and a whisper. "I love you, little one." "And I you," he said. She curled into a ball next to him, lending him her warmth. He sat motionless in the dark, wrestling with his disquiet.